Her name was Evelyn Mayfield, and at the age of 78, she had seen a lifetime of joys, sorrows, and everything in between. She had been married to Howard for 54 years, a man who had slowly become a stranger to her over time. As much as she loved him, their marriage was never easy. It was built on years of misunderstanding, silence, and moments when words were left unsaid. But through it all, Evelyn stayed by his side, finding solace in the quiet moments that reminded her of better times. Little did she know that the day she would say goodbye to Howard would mark the beginning of the most heartbreaking betrayal of her life. Memorial Day had arrived, and Evelyn, despite the pain of losing her husband, felt a strange sense of peace as she stood by his grave. It was the closure she never thought she would have, the final goodbye. The funeral had been a blur, filled with sympathetic faces, soft whispers, and the distant hum of mourning. But she was ready to return home, to rest and reflect on the life she had shared with Howard. Little did she know that what awaited her at home would shatter everything she thought she knew about love and family. As Evelyn walked up the path to her front door, she was met with an unexpected sight. The door was ajar, and as she stepped inside, her heart sank. Her belongings, the furniture, the personal items that had been part of her life for decades, were scattered outside the house as if she had been evicted. She couldn't believe her eyes. She stood frozen for a moment, unable to process the sight before her. The air felt thick, heavy with something dark that she couldn't quite understand. And then, she heard his voice, the voice of her son-in-law, Richard. His words hit her like a slap in the face, leaving her breathless. "You should have died with your rotten and stingy husband," he yelled, his voice dripping with venom. Evelyn's knees buckled, and she barely caught herself on the doorframe. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't how her life was supposed to end. As she stood there, unable to move, the shock of it all slowly sank in. Her own family, her daughter's husband, had thrown her out, discarded her like an old piece of furniture. The man she had always considered a son was now the one to drive the knife into her heart. She had given so much to her family, raised them, loved them, and yet, here she was, abandoned at the doorstep of her own home, with nothing but the cold night air and the echo of Richard's cruel words. What had she done to deserve this? Was this the price she paid for being loyal? Or was it simply the way the world worked, discarding the old and the vulnerable when they had no more value? But Evelyn wasn't ready to break. She wouldn't let this betrayal define her. She stood tall, wiping away the tears that had begun to form, her resolve hardening with every passing second. She was determined to find out why Richard had done this, and to reclaim her dignity. But as she looked down at the mess before her, a cold realization washed over her. This wasn't just about the house. This was about her place in the family, her worth as a person. The pain was unbearable, but Evelyn knew one thing. She couldn't just let it go. Not this time. The fire inside her was only beginning to ignite. She had been betrayed, yes, but she wasn't going to let this define her future. There was a strength in her that had been hidden for too long, and now it was time for that strength to shine. Evelyn took a deep breath, stepping over the threshold and into the night. Her journey had only just begun. What would she do next? How would she confront the man who had torn her life apart? Evelyn's steps were slow, deliberate, each one echoing the weight of the betrayal she had just experienced. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, feeling the cold glass against her skin like the chill in her heart. She dialed her daughter's number, the phone buzzing in her ear, but no answer. Evelyn felt a sinking feeling in her chest. Was this truly how her family felt about her now? Her daughter, Melanie, had always been the one who seemed to understand her. They'd had their disagreements, yes, but they shared a bond that had weathered many storms. She had hoped Melanie would have been there for her, that she would have stood up against Richard's cruelty, but instead, the silence was deafening. Evelyn knew in that moment, deep down, that her daughter had chosen her husband over her. Melanie had always been the kind of person who wanted peace at any cost, even if that meant turning a blind eye to the ugly truths staring her in the face. Evelyn walked back outside, gazing at the scattered belongings that had once been the pillars of her home, her life. the small rocking chair where she'd sat for hours, knitting blankets for her grandchildren, the old wooden desk where she had written letters to friends and family over the years. All of it was gone, tossed aside like it meant nothing. She fought back the tears that threatened to fall, determined not to let herself break. She turned her gaze to the house, her home for decades, now sitting empty. The once inviting front door now stood ajar, as though mocking her. The sound of the wind rustling the leaves in the trees above was the only thing that broke the silence. 1,000 questions ran through her mind. What did Richard think he could accomplish by doing this? What did he want from her? And why had Melanie stayed silent, letting her husband get away with this? Evelyn's mind raced with the memories of better times, of the family gatherings where they all came together, laughing and sharing stories. She had always believed that no matter how tough things got, they were a family. Nothing could tear them apart. But now, it felt like everything had crumbled in an instant, like the foundation she had built her life upon had been ripped from under her feet. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was Melanie calling back. Evelyn hesitated for a moment before answering, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mom." Melanie's voice was hesitant, distant. I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry. Richard, he didn't mean it. He's just... Don't. Evelyn interrupted, her voice shaking with a mixture of pain and anger. Don't make excuses for him, Melanie. He threw me out just like that. I gave everything to this family, and this is how you repay me? I thought you were my daughter. I thought you would be the one who would stand by me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Evelyn could hear Melanie's breath catch in her throat. I don't know what to say, Mom. I'm caught in the middle. Richard, he's been under a lot of stress. We've both been struggling, and you're choosing him over me. Evelyn's words cut through the phone, sharp as a knife. I get it now, Melanie. I've been nothing more than a burden to both of you. It's clear you've forgotten who I am. No, Mom, please, Melanie's voice cracked, but Evelyn wasn't having it anymore. You've forgotten everything, Melanie, and I won't let you get away with it, Evelyn said firmly, her resolve strengthening with every word. I've given you everything, and now it's time for me to take back what's mine. She hung up the phone before Melanie could say anything more. Evelyn stood there for a moment, letting the silence engulf her once again. The wind picked up, sending a chill through her bones, but she barely noticed. Her mind was already on the next steps. She wasn't going to let Richard win. She wasn't going to let her daughter's silence be the end of her story. Evelyn had a plan. She had always been a woman who could find a way, and this time, she wasn't about to give up. As she walked back into the house, stepping over the belongings that had been so carelessly discarded, Evelyn's eyes fell on the photo of Howard on the mantel. His face smiled back at her, a reminder of the man she had once loved, the man who had betrayed her in his own quiet way. She had loved him, but she wouldn't let his death be the end of her. No, this was just the beginning. Evelyn was done being a victim. It was time to take control. But the question remained, how would she do it? What steps would she take to make Richard and Melanie see the truth? The answers were coming, and they were coming fast. Evelyn sat in the dim light of her living room, the sounds of the night creeping in through the open window. The cool breeze did little to calm the storm inside her. Her mind was swirling with thoughts of what to do next. She couldn't go on like this, feeling abandoned, disrespected, and utterly betrayed. Richard's cruel words still rang in her ears, and the image of her belongings scattered outside haunted her. The anger inside her burned, but it wasn't a destructive kind of anger. No, this was the kind that fueled determination, the kind that made her stand taller, speak louder, and fight back harder. She wasn't going to let Richard get away with it. She wasn't going to let her own daughter, Melanie, stay silent and let her husband tear their family apart. She'd spent years supporting them, and now it was her turn to reclaim her dignity. It was time to stop crying and start acting. Evelyn knew she had one thing on her side, her knowledge of the law. Howard may have been distant and flawed, but he had always made sure Evelyn was taken care of. He had set things up so that, even in death, she would be financially secure. The house, the savings, everything they had built together, She was entitled to it all. Richard may have thought he could take everything from her, but he was about to learn that Evelyn Mayfield was not someone you could easily push around. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone again, this time dialing the number of her lawyer, Patricia Johnson. Patricia had been with them for years, helping with legal matters, ensuring everything was in order. Evelyn had always trusted her, and right now, she needed that trust more than ever. "Hello, Patricia," Evelyn said, trying to steady her voice. "I need your help. It's urgent." There was a pause, and then Patricia's warm voice answered. "Of course, Evelyn. What's going on?" "I need to make sure that my name is still on everything. The house, the accounts, everything that Howard and I had," Evelyn said, her voice filled with resolve. "I want to make sure Richard can't take any of it. He threw me out, Patricia. He humiliated me in front of my own home, and I won't let him get away with it." Patricia was quiet for a moment, taking in the gravity of Evelyn's words. "I see. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Let's make sure we take the proper steps. We'll go over everything tomorrow, okay? You'll be fine." Evelyn nodded, even though Patricia couldn't see it. "Thank you, Patricia. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Don't worry, Evelyn. We'll get this sorted out. I'll call you first thing in the morning," Patricia reassured her before ending the call. Evelyn felt a slight sense of relief wash over her, but she knew it was just the beginning. This wasn't going to be an easy fight. Richard would do everything he could to try and manipulate the situation in his favor. But Evelyn wasn't afraid anymore. She had been through too much to let this man strip her of her dignity. The next morning came quickly, and Evelyn wasted no time. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant outfit, something that made her feel strong and in control. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone, but today, she was going to show the world that she wasn't the helpless old woman Richard thought she was. She was a force to be reckoned with. The drive to Patricia's office was long, but it gave Evelyn time to think. She reflected on the years she had spent raising her children, helping them with their struggles and supporting their dreams. How had it come to this? Why had her family turned on her when she needed them most? The question gnawed at her, but Evelyn refused to let it consume her. She had bigger things to focus on now: her future, her independence, and her justice. When she arrived at Patricia's office, she was met with a warm smile and a reassuring handshake. "You're in good hands, Evelyn," Patricia said as they sat down across from each other. "Let's go over everything and make sure we're fully prepared." The next hour was spent going over the details of Howard's will and the legal steps that needed to be taken. Evelyn listened intently, nodding as Patricia explained what she needed to do next. It was a lot of paperwork, a lot of steps, but Evelyn knew she could handle it. She had been through worse, and she was ready to fight for what was rightfully hers. As Evelyn left the office, she felt more confident than ever. The first battle was won. Now, it was time to face Richard and make him understand that she wasn't someone to be underestimated. But even as Evelyn made her way home, a sense of unease crept over her. Richard wouldn't give up easily. He was already furious, and if he realized what Evelyn was doing, he would stop at nothing to make sure she didn't succeed. She had to stay one step ahead. The phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her back to reality. It was a text from Melanie. "I've been trying to reach you, Mom. Please, let's talk." Evelyn's heart clenched. How could her daughter be so blind? Did she really think that a simple conversation could fix everything? But as she looked at the text, Evelyn knew she had a choice to make. She could confront Melanie, but that might just play into Richard's hands. Or she could keep her distance, stay focused on the bigger picture, and let Melanie come to her when she was ready to see the truth. The decision weighed heavily on her, but Evelyn wasn't afraid. She had been betrayed, yes, but she was still standing. And that was something Richard and Melanie were going to have to reckon with. Please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Evelyn's fight is far from over, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The tension in Evelyn's chest hadn't eased since she left Patricia's office. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. Every step she took seemed to come with a new challenge, a new layer of betrayal she had to unravel. The wind picked up as she walked back to her house, but the chill was nothing compared to the cold feeling gnawing at her insides. When she arrived, she saw Richard's car still parked in the driveway. A pit formed in her stomach. He had been so certain when he kicked her out. So cruel. And yet, here he was, lingering, perhaps waiting for her to back down. Evelyn wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. No, she would face him head-on. She would no longer be silent. She would no longer let him control her. As she walked through the door, she saw Richard sitting on the couch, his arms crossed, his face tight with anger. His presence, once so familiar, now felt like an intrusion. A sense of calm washed over Evelyn as she stood there in the doorway, the weight of her decision settling into her bones. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. "Richard," she said, her voice steady, though the storm inside her was anything but calm. "I'm not leaving. I've called my lawyer, and I've made it clear that I'm staying here. This house is mine, and you will not take it from me." Richard's eyes flashed with irritation, but he didn't say anything immediately. He was trying to read her, to figure out what game she was playing. Evelyn could see it in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his fingers drummed against the arm of the chair. He was calculating, trying to figure out how to regain control. "You think you can just walk back in here, and everything will go back to normal?" Richard's voice was laced with mockery. "You're old, Evelyn. You've outlived your usefulness. No one's going to support you anymore." Evelyn stood her ground, her hands clenched by her sides. "You don't get to decide that for me, Richard. Not anymore." Richard's eyes narrowed, but before he could speak again, Evelyn raised her hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Let me be clear. I may be old, but I'm not weak," she continued, each word cutting through the air like a sharpened blade. "And I won't let you walk all over me anymore. I've spent my whole life supporting this family, raising my children, and taking care of everything. Now it's my turn." Richard's face twisted in disbelief. He clearly wasn't used to being spoken to in this way. "You think you can just threaten me and I'll bow down to you?" His voice was louder now, full of anger and frustration. Evelyn took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you the truth. The truth you've been ignoring. You think you've won, but you haven't. Not yet." Richard stood up, his face red with fury. "You don't have a say in this, Evelyn. You've got nothing. Nothing but a house that's barely worth anything and a bank account that's already drained. What are you going to do? Sue me?" Evelyn didn't flinch. She was done playing his games. She'd spent her life playing the role of the loving mother, the caring wife, the one who always put others first. But no more. She wasn't going to beg for her place in this family. She wasn't going to beg for respect. "No," Evelyn said, her voice calm, yet filled with a power she hadn't felt in years. "I'm not going to sue you. I'm going to take back what's mine. And you'll learn the hard way that you can't take what doesn't belong to you." Richard stepped forward, his fists clenched, but Evelyn didn't back down. She met his glare, refusing to show any sign of fear. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the small, weak woman she had been made to feel. She felt strong, resolute, and determined to fight for her future, for the respect she had long deserved. But just as Richard was about to speak, there was a knock at the door. The sound was sharp, almost like fate had intervened at the perfect moment. Evelyn turned toward the door, her heart racing. Was it someone from the bank? Was it Patricia, ready to take the next step? Or was it someone else, someone who could help her finally get the upper hand? Richard turned toward the door as well, his frustration momentarily replaced by confusion. He hadn't been expecting anyone. Evelyn felt a flicker of hope rise within her. This could be the moment she had been waiting for. But she knew better than to get her hopes up too quickly. "Who is it?" Richard barked, his irritation clearly growing. Evelyn didn't answer. She simply moved toward the door, feeling the weight of everything that had led her here. The years of sacrifice, the betrayal, the pain. She wasn't going to let it break her. When she opened the door, she wasn't prepared for what she saw. Standing in the doorway was a woman Evelyn hadn't seen in years. A woman she had never thought would be part of a story again. The woman's presence felt like a storm cloud entering the room, heavy with secrets. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the face. Evelyn stood frozen in the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. The woman who stood before her was someone she had not seen in over 2 decades. Her name was Veronica, and she had been a friend of the family, more than that, really. She had been close to Howard, a confidant, someone who had once been welcomed into their home as family. But when Howard had passed, Veronica had vanished, disappearing without a trace. Until now. Veronica's eyes met Evelyn's, and for a brief moment, everything around them seemed to fade away. The anger in Richard's voice, the betrayal in his eyes, the injustice of everything that had happened, it all melted into the background. The woman in front of her was like a ghost from the past, but the question that burned in Evelyn's mind was, why was she here? And what did she want? Evelyn, Veronica said, her voice low but steady. I need to talk to you. It's important. Evelyn blinked, trying to shake off the shock of seeing her. She could feel Richard's presence behind her, his irritation rising again as he shifted on his feet, but Evelyn couldn't focus on him right now. Veronica was standing on her doorstep, and something in her eyes told Evelyn that this wasn't a mere coincidence. Why now? Evelyn finally managed to say, her voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and caution. Why are you here? After all this time? Veronica took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. It's about Howard, she said, her voice tight with emotion. There are things you don't know. Things I should have told you a long time ago. Things that could change everything for you. Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want to hear anything that could make this situation even more complicated than it already was. But there was something in Veronica's voice that made her pause, something that made her wonder if there's more to Howard's death than she had been led to believe. You're going to have to explain yourself, Veronica, Evelyn said, her voice cold and firm. Because right now, all I'm hearing are vague promises, and I've had enough of those in my life. Veronica nodded, her gaze dropping to the ground for a moment before she met Evelyn's eyes again. I know it's hard to believe, she said, but Howard didn't die the way you think he did. His death wasn't an accident. It was planned. And Richard, she paused, glancing over Evelyn's shoulder at him. He was part of it. The words hit Evelyn like a freight train, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. Richard? Her son-in-law? The man who had been in her life for years? He was involved in Howard's death? Evelyn could feel her pulse quicken as everything she had known about her life and her family began to unravel. Richard stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. What is this? What nonsense is she feeding you, Evelyn? He spat. Don't listen to her. She's been gone for years. What does she even know about anything? But Evelyn wasn't looking at Richard anymore. She was looking at Veronica, who was now holding her gaze with a solemn expression. Why should I believe you? Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why should I trust anything you say after all this time? If what you're saying is true, then why didn't you come to me sooner? Why wait until now? Veronica's face softened, and she stepped closer to Evelyn, her eyes filled with regret. I was scared, she admitted. I knew the truth, but I didn't want to be involved. Howard made me promise not to tell you anything, and You kept secrets from me, Evelyn interrupted, her voice sharp. All these years, and now you expect me to believe you? After everything? Veronica flinched at the accusation, but she didn't back down. I know it's hard to hear, she said, but I couldn't keep living with the guilt. Howard knew what was coming. He knew Richard would eventually betray you. He was trying to protect you, but he couldn't stop what was already set in motion. The only reason Richard acted the way he did after Howard's death, it's because he was after something Howard had. Something that was supposed to be yours, Evelyn. Evelyn's head spun. She had thought she was living in a nightmare, but now it felt like she had been living in a lie. Richard was involved in Howard's death. And now he was trying to take everything from her home, her inheritance, her dignity. I don't know if I can trust you, Evelyn said slowly, her eyes narrowing. But if what you're saying is true, then I need proof. I need to know what really happened. Veronica nodded, her face determined. I've kept the evidence all these years. I hid it because I was scared, but I can't stay silent anymore. I'm going to show you everything. Evelyn's heart raced as Veronica reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn envelope. She handed it to Evelyn, who hesitated for a moment before taking it from her. The envelope was thick with papers, photographs, documents, and letters. Evelyn's hands shook as she opened it, her eyes scanning the contents. Each page was a revelation, each word adding a new layer of betrayal to the already twisted story she had been living. But what caught her attention first was a single photograph of Howard and Richard, sitting at a table, deep in conversation, with a man Evelyn had never seen before. And the document beneath it, it was a contract, signed by Howard, but with Richard's name prominently featured. "These are your answers, Evelyn," Veronica said quietly, her voice filled with sadness. "And they will change everything." As Evelyn stared at the photograph and the contract, a chill ran down her spine. The truth was out there, but how far was she willing to go to uncover it? And what would it cost her in the end? Evelyn's hands trembled as she set the photograph and the contract on the table before her, each page heavier than the last. The evidence was right there, right in front of her, proof of the unimaginable betrayal that had been hidden from her for so long. She couldn't take her eyes off the photograph. Howard, the man she had loved for over 50 years, had been sitting with Richard. The same Richard who had cast her out of her home, the same one who had spewed venomous words at her. He had been conspiring with someone else, someone she didn't recognize, someone who had somehow become involved in her family's affairs. Her mind spun in circles, but a single thought rose above the chaos. Why had Howard kept this from her? Why had he allowed Richard to be a part of this secret? The pain of betrayal settled deep in her chest, but it was quickly replaced with something else, something colder. Anger.
Rage.
This wasn't just about money or power. This was about the complete and utter disregard for her life, her existence, and her place in her own family. Richard had used Howard's death as an opportunity, a chance to manipulate and take control. He hadn't just thrown her out of the house, he had tried to erase her from everything. But Evelyn wasn't going to let that happen. Not without a fight. Richard's voice echoed in her mind, cruel and sharp. "You should have died with your rotten and stingy husband." Evelyn could hear it now, as if it had been said only moments ago. It wasn't just the words that stung. It was the truth buried within them. Richard thought he could have it all. He thought he could crush her and walk away with everything. But he didn't know who he was dealing with. Evelyn Mayfield wasn't someone who would go quietly into the night. She had lived through too much to be broken by a man like him. As she looked at the documents, she could feel the weight of her next decision pressing down on her. She couldn't let this go.
Not now.
Not when everything she had ever worked for was at stake. She wasn't going to wait for Richard to make the next move. She was going to take control, and she would do whatever it took to expose the truth. "What do you want me to do with this?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady, though the storm inside her continued to rage. Veronica stepped closer, her expression somber. "You need to take it to your lawyer. These documents prove that Richard was part of something far bigger than just stealing from you. Howard, he was trying to protect you from this, but Richard, he's been planning this for a long time. If you don't act now, everything could be lost." Evelyn didn't need to hear more. She had already made up her mind. She was going to take these documents straight to Patricia. She was going to get the legal backing she needed to fight Richard and take back control. But she knew that wasn't the end of it. Richard wouldn't back down easily. This fight was going to get uglier before it got better. She had to be prepared for the worst. "Thank you, Veronica," Evelyn said quietly, her gaze never leaving the pile of evidence in front of her. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Veronica smiled weakly. "I'm sorry for not coming to you sooner, Evelyn, but I knew this was the only way." With that, Veronica turned and walked toward the door, leaving Evelyn alone with the documents that would change everything. She needed to act fast. There was no time to waste. Before Evelyn could take the next step, there was a knock at the door. It was sharp, insistent. She stood frozen for a moment. Who else could it be? Had Richard come back? Was this part of his next move? Or could it be Melanie, her daughter, finally reaching out, finally realizing the truth? Evelyn walked over to the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She opened it slowly, and what she saw made her heart skip a beat. Standing in front of her was Melanie. But there was something different about her, something that Evelyn couldn't quite place. Her daughter's eyes were swollen, her face pale, and there was a deep sadness in her expression. She wasn't angry. She wasn't offensive. She was broken. "Mom," Melanie whispered, her voice shaky.
I need to talk to you."
Evelyn stepped back, her pulse racing. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected Melanie to show up, not after everything that had happened. The pain of the past few days seemed to soften slightly as she looked at her daughter standing there, vulnerable and searching for something Evelyn wasn't sure she could offer. "I know you're angry," Melanie continued, her voice cracking. "But I need to explain. I need you to understand why I did what I did." Evelyn didn't know whether to be relieved or furious. Part of her wanted to scream at Melanie for turning her back on her. But another part of her, the part that still loved her daughter despite everything, wanted to hear her out. To know why Melanie had allowed Richard to do what he did. To understand why she had chosen to remain silent when Evelyn needed her most. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Melanie," Evelyn said, her voice soft but firm. "But I'll listen." Melanie nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I didn't want to believe Richard could do something like this. I thought I was protecting you by staying out of it, but now I see how wrong I was."
"Mom, I'm so sorry."
"I should have known better. I should have been there for you." Evelyn's heart broke, but she didn't let it show. She wasn't ready to let Melanie off the hook just yet. Not until she understood the full truth of everything that had happened. But as Evelyn looked at her daughter, she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What did Melanie really know about Richard's plans? Was she just another pawn in his game, or was there more to this story than Evelyn realized? Evelyn listened as Melanie's voice cracked with emotion, her words tumbling out in a rush. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected her daughter to show up, let alone with an apology so raw, so real. But Evelyn wasn't ready to let her guard down. Not yet. She had been burned too many times, and now it was clear. Richard wasn't the only one who had let her down. Melanie had, too. "You've been silent for so long, Melanie," Evelyn said quietly, her eyes searching her daughter's face. "You watched it all happen, and yet you said nothing. You let Richard tear me apart, and you stood by him." Melanie's face crumpled, and Evelyn saw the weight of guilt in her eyes. "I didn't know what to do," Melanie whispered, almost pleading. I thought if I stayed out of it, everything would calm down. I didn't want to choose sides. I thought it would tear our family apart." Evelyn shook her head slowly, her heart heavy. "But that's exactly what you did, Melanie. You let it happen. And now I'm standing here, with my life in shambles, and you expect me to just forgive you." Tears welled up in Melanie's eyes, and she reached out to take Evelyn's hand, but Evelyn pulled it back, holding her ground. "I know I messed up," Melanie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I hurt you, and I'll never be able to undo that. But I need you to understand. Richard, he's not who you think he is. He's been hiding things from all of us. From me, too." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, hiding things?" Melanie hesitated, looking around the room as if to make sure no one else was listening. "I found something," she said quietly, glancing at the table where the documents Veronica had given Evelyn were still spread out. "I wasn't sure what to do with it, but I have a feeling it's connected to everything. It's about the money and Howard's business. Richard's been talking to people behind my back. I think he was planning this for a long time." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about? What's he been planning?" Melanie stood there for a moment, her hands trembling. She took a deep breath before continuing. "I found emails, Mom. Secret meetings, transactions. He was going behind your back, and I didn't even realize it until now. I thought he was just being protective of me, but I see it now. He's been plotting. He wanted control of everything." Evelyn's mind raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Richard wasn't just trying to take over the house. He was trying to take over everything. Howard's estate, his assets, their future. This wasn't about her being a burden, as Richard had put it. This was about greed.
Power. Control.
"Melanie," Why didn't you say anything sooner? Evelyn asked, her voice soft but filled with disbelief. Why let me be blindsided like this? I was scared, Melanie admitted, her voice cracking. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Richard, he made me believe that he was doing all of this for us.
For the family.
And I was too blind to see what was really happening. But when I found those emails, I knew I had to come to you. You were right all along, and I should have believed you.
I'm so sorry, Mom.
Evelyn felt a pang in her chest. Part of her wanted to scream at Melanie for being so naive, for allowing Richard to pull the strings behind her back. But another part of her, the motherly part, wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But it wasn't okay. It was far from it. Evelyn's life had been turned upside down, and now, even after everything, she was still struggling to pick up the pieces. Sorry doesn't fix this, Melanie, Evelyn said, her voice low but steady. You don't get to just say sorry and expect me to forgive you. You let Richard destroy everything. You let him take everything from me, and you stood by him while I was thrown out into the street like trash. Melanie nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, Mom. I know. And I wish I could go back and change it. But I can't. All I can do now is help you fix it. If you'll let me. Evelyn stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of her daughter's words. Could she really trust Melanie again? Could she truly forgive her? The pain was still too fresh, too raw, but somewhere deep inside, Evelyn knew she wasn't going to let Richard have the last word. She wasn't going to let him tear apart what was left of her family. She had spent so many years trying to keep the peace, trying to keep everyone happy.
But it was time for a change. Time to take control.
It was time to make Richard pay for everything he had done. All right, Evelyn said finally, her voice hardening. I'll let you help me. But this isn't just about you and me. This is about taking Richard down. And if you want to be part of this, you need to make a choice right now. You're either with me or you're not. Melanie nodded quickly, her resolve matching her mother's. I'm with you, Mom. Whatever it takes. I'll help you bring him down. Evelyn looked at her daughter, her heart heavy with a mixture of relief and resentment. Could she really trust her again? Could they rebuild what had been broken?
She didn't know yet.
But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had a real ally by her side. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. But as the two women stood there, ready to face the battle ahead, neither of them could shake the feeling that Richard wasn't going to go down without a fight. There was more to this story, and Evelyn was about to find out just how deep the deception ran. The sun was setting as Evelyn and Melanie sat at the kitchen table, the weight of their conversation still hanging in the air. Evelyn had been through a lot over the past few days, but today, something felt different. The resolve in her daughter's eyes, the determination to help her fight back against Richard. It gave Evelyn a small sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face this battle alone. They had a long road ahead. The evidence they had was just the beginning, but they had to act fast. Richard would undoubtedly be furious when he found out that Evelyn wasn't backing down. And if he was hiding anything else, anything more sinister than just a grab for her money and property, they needed to uncover it before it was too late. Evelyn's mind raced as she thought of the next steps. She needed to be strategic, calculating. Richard had already shown how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. He had thrown her out of the house, tried to humiliate her, and now he was trying to take everything that Howard had left behind. But what if there was more to this than just money? What if Richard had a secret agenda, something even darker than Evelyn had imagined? Mom, what's the plan? Melanie's voice brought her back to the present, her tone a little uncertain, but full of determination. How do we stop him? Evelyn leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as she thought about the next steps. She needed more than just the documents Veronica had provided. They needed hard evidence. They needed to expose Richard for who he really was before he could make his next move. But how? How could she go about gathering the truth without risking everything she had left? I think it's time we pay Richard a visit, Evelyn said slowly, the idea forming in her mind. I'm going to confront him.
Head on.
But this time, I'm going to be prepared. I'm not going to back down, Melanie. I'm not going to let him walk all over me anymore. Melanie looked at her, a mixture of concern and resolve in her eyes. Are you sure?
He's dangerous, Mom.
If he knows we're onto him. I know, Evelyn interrupted, her voice firm. But I'm done being afraid. I've spent my whole life letting people walk all over me. Not anymore. It's time to take control. The next morning, Evelyn and Melanie drove to Richard's house. The air between them was thick with anticipation, each of them unsure of what to expect. Evelyn had spent a long time planning what she was going to say, but nothing could fully prepare her for the confrontation that awaited. When they arrived, Richard's car was parked in the driveway. He wasn't home yet, but Evelyn knew he wouldn't be gone for long. They had to act quickly. Let's go inside, Evelyn said, her voice low. She had no intention of waiting outside any longer. She was done with fear, done with being passive. She was ready to confront this head-on. Melanie hesitated for a moment but nodded, following her mother up to the front door. Evelyn knocked twice, each strike of her hand like a drumbeat in her chest. Her heart was racing, but she couldn't back down now. Richard opened the door, his face freezing in a mask of surprise when he saw them standing there. He quickly tried to recover, but Evelyn could see the flicker of tension in his eyes. He had known this moment was coming. He just hadn't expected it to come so soon. What are you two doing here? Richard's voice was sharp, his eyes flicking nervously between Evelyn and Melanie. We need to talk, Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. About Howard, about you, and about everything you've been hiding from us. Richard's face flushed with anger. I don't know what you're talking about, he snapped, stepping back to close the door, but Evelyn was faster. She pushed the door open just enough to stop him from closing it, her presence unwavering. You don't get to walk away from this, Richard, she said coldly, her hand still on the door. Not anymore. He turned to face her, his lips curling into a sneer. You don't know anything. I've been trying to protect what's left of this family, and you're too old to understand what's really going on. Evelyn's blood boiled at his words. I understand more than you think, Richard, she shot back. And I'm not going to let you get away with what you've done. You've been planning this for a long time. You've been working behind my back, and I'm done letting you control everything. I'm taking back what's mine. Richard's eyes widened slightly, the shock quickly replaced by rage. You think you can just take everything from me? His voice was low, dangerous. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Evelyn. You think you can walk in here and... I'm not here to argue. Evelyn cut him off, her voice hard. I'm here to make sure you understand that your game is over. You've been lying, you've been scheming, and I have the proof to take you down. Richard's eyes flickered to the table behind Evelyn, where the documents and photographs were still in her bag. She could tell he had seen them. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. You have no idea what you're up against, he sneered. This isn't just about a house. You don't know what you're walking into. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice unwavering. I know exactly what I'm walking into. And you should be scared, Richard, because the truth is coming for you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. For a moment, there was silence. Evelyn could feel the tension between them, thick and suffocating. She could see Richard's mind working, trying to figure out his next move. But it was too late. Evelyn had already taken the first step toward her victory. Just then, the doorbell rang, breaking the silence. Evelyn froze at the sound of the doorbell, her heart skipping a beat. It was as though everything she had worked for, the tension, the confrontation, was all about to unravel in an instant. She glanced at Richard, whose face had hardened with suspicion. His eyes narrowed, and the anger that had been simmering underneath the surface began to boil over. Who was that? Richard hissed, his voice low and filled with an edge Evelyn hadn't heard before. His gaze darted toward the door, and for a moment, Evelyn thought he might try to slam it shut again. But she wasn't about to let that happen. Whoever it is, they're interrupting our conversation, Evelyn said coolly, stepping aside so Richard could see her steely resolve. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She wasn't afraid of anyone. Richard glared at her, and for a split second, she saw his mask crack. The man who had been so controlling, so confident, was now rattled. For the first time, Evelyn felt a sense of triumph. She was the one holding the power now. She had taken back control of her narrative, and Richard wasn't going to like where it led. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Without a word, Evelyn marched past Richard, her heart pounding in her chest. She opened the door to find a delivery man standing on the porch, holding a large box. "Delivery for Evelyn Mayfield?" the man asked, looking her over with a polite smile. Evelyn blinked in surprise. Yes, that's me." The man handed her the box, and as she took it, her eyes flicked to Richard. She could feel his eyes burning into her back, and the tension between them was palpable. She turned to face him and saw his expression morph from confusion to anger. He was clearly wondering what was in the box, and why it had arrived at this very moment. Evelyn took a deep breath and set the box on the nearby table. She turned to Richard, her voice steady. "I think you've seen enough. You know I have the proof to bring you down, and I'm not leaving until I see this through." Richard's face twisted in fury. "You really think you can just walk in here and take everything from me?" His voice rose in pitch, the venom seeping through his words. "You're nothing but a relic, Evelyn. A burden to be discarded. I should have known better than to let you live in my house for so long." Evelyn's hands clenched into fists, but she kept her calm. "You've made one mistake after another, Richard. You thought you could bully me into submission, thought you could take everything from me. But you were wrong. You underestimated me, and now you're going to pay the price." Richard's face contorted with rage, but before he could react, Evelyn opened the box. Inside, she found something she hadn't expected. The moment she saw it, her heart stopped. It was a recorder, a small device that looked like a typical voice recorder but with a few extra features. And attached to it was a letter, typed in a way that made Evelyn's stomach drop. The letter was from Howard's lawyer, and it was addressed to Evelyn. As she read through the letter, she could feel her blood run cold. The contents were worse than anything she had imagined. It outlined everything. The hidden business dealings, the secret investments, the deals Howard had been working on before his death. It revealed that Richard had been secretly siphoning money from Howard's accounts for years, using his position as a trusted family member to steal from them all. The evidence was there in black and white. Howard had known about Richard's plans. He had tried to expose him, but Richard had been too smart, too clever for everyone around him. Until now. Evelyn's hands shook as she held the letter, her mind reeling from the truth that had been hidden from her. She had suspected something was wrong, but to see it laid out in front of her like this was a whole new level of betrayal. "Richard," Evelyn said, her voice colder than it had ever been. "You've been stealing from us. From me. From Howard. And now I have the proof. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done. You won't get away with it." Richard stood frozen in shock, his eyes wide as he looked from the recorder to the letter. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You're lying. This isn't real." But Evelyn wasn't listening to him anymore. She had already seen enough. She knew she couldn't let Richard get away with this, no matter how hard he tried to deny it. "I'm going to the authorities," Evelyn said firmly, her voice unwavering. "And you're going to face the consequences of your actions." Richard took a step forward, his hands trembling with anger. "You don't understand, Evelyn. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. If you go to the police, you'll ruin everything. You'll ruin your family. Evelyn held up her hand, cutting him off. "You don't get to threaten me anymore, Richard. You've already done enough damage. But I'm done. I'm done letting you control everything." She turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped her. "You can't do this. You'll regret it, Evelyn. You have no idea what you're up against." Evelyn stopped, her back still to him. She didn't turn around, but her voice was clear. "I've been through too much to be afraid of you now. The only regret I'll have is not doing this sooner." With that, she walked out, the door slamming behind her. Melanie followed closely behind, her eyes wide with shock and awe. But Evelyn knew that this was just the beginning. The hard part was yet to come. The silence in the car was deafening as Evelyn and Melanie drove to the police station. Evelyn couldn't remember the last time she had felt this sure about a decision. Every part of her was bracing for the storm that was about to hit. Richard wasn't going to give up easily. He would fight back, use whatever power he still had to keep the truth buried. But Evelyn was done running, done hiding. She had lived in the shadows of her family's secrets for far too long, and now, finally, it was time to step into the light and claim what was hers. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Melanie said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "What if Richard does something worse? What if?" Evelyn cut her off with a firm glance. "We can't keep living in fear, Melanie. It's time we take control of our lives. Richard's not just a threat to me. He's a threat to everyone in this family, and it's time he paid for what he's done." Melanie fell silent, nodding slowly as she gazed out the window. Evelyn could feel her daughter's anxiety, but it didn't waver her resolve. She had made her choice. She was going to see this through, no matter the cost. As they arrived at the police station, the weight of everything Evelyn had been through settled heavily on her shoulders. The letters, the evidence, the photographs, everything was about to come to light. She could almost feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her, but it was a weight she was finally ready to bear. Inside the station, the air was cool, the hum of fluorescent lights above them filling the silence. They walked up to the desk, where a uniformed officer greeted them. Evelyn's heart raced as she handed over the package containing the evidence. The officer looked at her with mild surprise but nodded, taking the papers without a word. He then motioned for them to follow him. Evelyn's hands were clammy as they walked down the sterile hallways, each step carrying her closer to the moment of truth. She glanced at Melanie, who was now walking beside her, shoulders squared, but eyes still filled with doubt. Evelyn knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her daughter reclaiming the trust that had been broken, about both of them finding their voice in a family that had tried to silence them. The officer stopped outside a door and knocked lightly. "Detective Harris will be with you in a moment," he said, then walked off, leaving them standing outside a small, unassuming office. Evelyn took a deep breath. She could feel the nervous energy from Melanie beside her, but she also sensed something else, something that filled her with quiet pride. This was it. This was the moment they had both been waiting for. They had been through the pain, the betrayal, the humiliation, and now they were about to take back what had been stolen from them. The door opened, and a middle-aged man in a dark suit stepped out. He had the look of someone who had seen a lot in his career, a tired, knowing gaze, but a demeanor that exuded professionalism. Ms. Mayfield," he said, offering a firm handshake to both of them. "I'm Detective Harris. Please come in." Evelyn nodded, following him into the small office. She took a seat across from his desk, Melanie sitting beside her. The detective closed the door behind them, then sat down, his hands folded on the desk in front of him. There was no small talk. He could tell from the look in their eyes that they weren't here for trivial matters. This was serious. "Ms. Mayfield," Detective Harris began, his voice calm but direct, "I understand you have evidence regarding your late husband's death. And it seems there are also issues involving your son-in-law, Richard Mayfield. Is that correct?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes, it's all in the papers. The documents, the photographs, the contracts. Richard has been siphoning money from Howard's accounts for years. He's been planning to take everything. He's been lying, manipulating everyone. And I want him to pay for it." Detective Harris took the envelope from the desk, carefully flipping through the contents. His brow furrowed as he examined each page. The room was quiet except for the rustle of paper and the sound of Evelyn's breathing, deep and steady. After a moment, Detective Harris set the papers down and looked at them both, his expression serious. "This is very serious, Ms. Mayfield. You've provided us with a great deal of evidence, and it paints a picture of fraud, manipulation, and, well, much more. What you've described here is more than just financial theft. There are signs of premeditated actions, an elaborate scheme designed to benefit one person at the cost of others." Evelyn's stomach tightened. She had suspected this all along. But hearing it from someone else, someone who understood the full scope of Richard's actions, made it feel real. "I need him arrested. I need him to pay for everything he's done." The detective nodded slowly. "We'll need to conduct a full investigation, Ms. Mayfield. This isn't something we can move on quickly, but rest assured, we'll follow the trail and take appropriate action. This is the beginning of the process, and we'll keep you informed as we move forward. Evelyn felt the weight in her chest lighten just a little. This was it. Richard was finally going to face the consequences of his actions. The evidence they had, everything they had gathered, was going to be the key to bringing him down. But there was one last thing Evelyn needed to know. "What about Melanie?" she asked, her voice steady. How do we make sure Richard doesn't retaliate? He's not going to go down without a fight." Detective Harris looked between them, his expression softening. "I understand your concern, Ms. Mayfield, but it's important that you stay strong. We'll make sure you're protected during this process. As for Richard, we'll be moving forward with charges against him. The sooner we get this out in the open, the better." Evelyn nodded, feeling a sense of closure settle over her. The fight wasn't over yet, but they had taken the first real step toward justice. Richard's reign of terror was coming to an end. As she stood up, she turned to Melanie, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and relief. "We did it," Evelyn whispered. "We're going to be okay." Melanie smiled softly, tears welling up in her eyes. "We're stronger than we think, Mom." Evelyn gave her daughter's hand a reassuring squeeze. They had been through hell together, but now they were finally standing on the other side. And nothing, not even Richard, could tear them apart. Please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Evelyn's journey has been long and painful, but this is only the beginning of her victory. Stay tuned for more updates as justice is served.